Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I am delighted to welcome a very senior and respected professional from the social sector from Mumbai, India, Mr. Nishit Kumar. Nishit, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Nishit is the founder and managing director of Center for Social and Behavior Change Communication, which is SPC Cube. He is a director on the board of the Foundation for Rebuilding Childhoods, a Section 8 nonprofit company. He's a member of the Board of Studies, Extension and Communication, SNDT Women's University, Mumbai, and many more. And given the amazing work Nishit has been doing, understandably, he's been recognized, felicitated, and awarded several times. So, Nishit, my first question to you, can you share some of the pivotal moments in your career that led you to transition from advertising and the corporate sector to the development sector?
Yes, I can, Ashutosh. I joined the corporate sector when I was picked from my B school campus in Delhi by
Hmm.
the Tatas. And my first assignment was with Ratan Tata at Nelco, which was the
Hmm.
Tata's electronics enterprise at that point of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good experience for me. I grew very rapidly in that organization. But the departments I were in were more office electronics and industrial electronics. And I didn't have an engineering background, prior to my postgraduate in business. I had a commerce graduation. So I wanted to transition to consumer products. And I wanted to go into consumer products. And unfortunately, at that time, the Tatas didn't have an opening in the consumer products
Hmm.
companies of theirs. They had a company called Lakme at that time, but
Yeah.
it for me that transition would have been very, very difficult from office electronics.
Hmm.
So, and I also fell in love at that time, got married, wanted a house. I wanted, and the Tatas had no provision for. It's a conservative group, with no provision for giving a house. I went abroad, in a senior position to the Middle East, but was ambitious, wanted to do something. Came back, and I thought the best route to consumer products would be through via the advertising route. So I met a few people, senior people. I was introduced to Ravi Gupta, the late Ravi Gupta of Trikaya,
Hmm.
who had founded an agency called Trikaya and had just launched the Thumbs Up brand,
Hmm.
across the country. And I met him. We had a long conversation, and I then joined him as a group head, looking after Thumbs Up. And I also they were going to close down a brand, a 30-year-old brand called Gold Spot at that time. And I then presented a plan for resuscitation of that brand, revived that brand, tied up with Jungle Book, and that brand became a huge success uh,
Yes.
thereafter. So that was my advertising transition. Advertising was very good, rewarding, 15 years, uh, very well recognized. In those days, advertising was a small industry, 500 crores,
Yeah.
unlike the over a lakh and a half crore that it is now.
Correct.
And at that time, there were really no, business MBA kind of people in the advertising sector. It was all
Hmm.
filled with theater and people like that.
Yeah.
And Alec Padansi used to say I couldn't get a job anywhere else, and that's why I came to advertising. He was a theater person
Yeah.
and an
Yeah.
extraordinary advertising man.
Hmm.
So I was quite influenced those days by the sector. I went and did programs at IIM Ahmedabad on brand and things like that. And advertising was very successful. Then, uh, I started my own agency, which is what was the done thing those days in 1990. I started my own agency. And my first client was Dr. Varghese Kurian of NDDB.
Hmm.
And he, earlier with JRD Tata and Ratan Tata, and now with Dr. Kurian, I thought I was extremely lucky in getting gurus that I could work with.
Yeah.
And I learned from a lot. And I learned from them a lot, including the values and attitudes and all that they stood for.
Hmm.
So, uh, you know, in the mid 90s, around 93, 94, I started working on my first computer, a Macintosh. Those days, computers are coming to India
Yeah.
post
Nishit, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'd like to move to Center for Social and Behavioral Change quickly.
okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So I was in the corporate sector, and then I was asked to go and do some work at the post-tsunami in Chennai. And that's where I discovered the development sector. I found the sector full of people who were very passionate, who would work for very low salaries and would offer. So I came and joined that sector for 5 years after I was the CEO of an ITS company at that time. I left the company. For 5 years, I did pro bono work with a number of causes: children, girl child, governance, senior citizens, mentally challenged, and so on and so forth. And then in 2005, I joined Childline India full time after being convinced by the executive director of that company that they were running a that they were working for children, and working for children would cover all segments automatically. And 11 years of my life were taken by Childline India, setting up contact centers with integrating IT and telecom was my forte. That was my background in the ITES company that I was in. And Childline grew very rapidly. We did 1.5 million calls a month at that time. Then in 2015, I was diagnosed with cancer. And, after parts of my body were removed, and everybody advised me not to go back to Childline at that time because the job I had, the head of operations, was a very high pressure, intensive job. So I left, and I wanted to do something in social and behavior change communication, which I'd learned because during the 11-year period in Childline, I developed the draft for the POXO law, took it past Parliament, came on the second episode of Satyamay Jayate to tell the country why we need the law. The Rajya Sabha passed it in January 2012, but the Lok Sabha didn't pass it. And then after that show, and a couple of million SMS messages went to PMO in August of 2012, that bill was passed in Parliament, the POXO bill. And I was then doing a program for children on how to sensitize them on safe and unsafe touch. And it was a very tricky thing because, the moment you talked about these kind of things, parents would rush to school and say, look, you're teaching sex education. That's when I learned social and behavior change. And then that became a kind of aspiration that SBCC I found was at the heart of most development sector interventions worldwide: HIV, polio, TB, water and sanitation, hygiene, menstrual hygiene management. Virtually every major intervention in the world at SBCC. So I determined to start an SBCC intervention-based model, the first in the country. And that's how SBCC came about in 2017.
So what is the mission of SBC3? Is it SBC3 or SBC Cube?
On WhatsApp and all that, we can't write Cube. So, we write SBC3. But it's SBC Cube because there are 3 C's in our name. Center for Social and Behavior Change Communication.
That's what I thought. So what is the vision and the mission of SBC Cube?
Basically, the vision and mission of SBC Cube is to look at the youth of the country, help them get free of anything that holds them back, whether it is knowledge, whether it is mental health, whether it is ignorance, any of the issues, and allow them to achieve their full potential, and India to achieve its demographic dividends. And that is the thing. So we develop and implement SPCC based interventions. So for example, we are working across Maharashtra for ending child marriages. We are working in schools in Mumbai for adolescent mental health. So like that, we do a lot of work which uses SPCC, which is a science-based technique, on social and individual behavior change.
Very interesting. And how are you different from so many organizations that seem to be doing a similar kind of work?
We are different because we only do SPCC-based interventions. Now, basically, the model is called the socio-ecological model, where the core target audience is surrounded by all the influencer groups, the interpersonal, the community, the state, and so on, whatever influences them. And then we use science models, on behavior change, why people behave in a particular way, and how to change that. We use those kind of interventions. Look, essentially, the development sector has only 3 roles for it: intervention, advocacy, intervention, and communication.
Correct.
Communication is largely behavior change across the world. I mean, if I tell you there is no cure for COVID, and the only thing you need to do is to wear a mask, sanitize your hand, and maintain a distance, That is behavior change. It's, at the heart of COVID appropriate behavior, COVID appropriate behavior is behavior change. Unless you change your behavior, you are going to be affected by COVID. So at the heart of this is that many organizations do interventions in terms of child labor or abuse or exploitation or trafficking or there are various kinds. So these are first responders like Childland. They would go and pick up the child. Then there will be second responders who will go and do intervention to the child, whether it's education or whether it's home, shelter home, and so on and so forth. So various kinds of intervention will be done. SPCC tends to work with virtually every kind of intervention to increase the impact and make a sustainable behavior change as a part of the intervention.
Very interesting. But the other thing, Nishit, I've often seen, given the diversity of our country, which is also culturally very diverse. When you talk of behavior change, how do you tackle the challenges in implementing your strategies across so many diverse communities and cultures?
That's the beauty of SPCC. Just to give you an analogy to answer that question, when we started researching in Maharashtra, we do what's called a CAP research, knowledge, attitudes, and practices. This is a qualitative research, in-depth consultations, and all that happen. And we found, for example, in Maharashtra, the Ratnagiri area, parents would say, "Oh, that's fine if I have no secondary school in my block. I will send our daughter to secondary school in the next block or the next district. We have no problem." Whereas in Marathwada, parents turned around and said, in the same state, no, there is no secondary school in our block, and we refuse to send our girl to another secondary school in another block, another district, because it's too risky for her.
Right.
So in the same state, you have these two various attitudes. So you have to deal with these things. So what we do is we go behind that. What is it that affects the parents in Marathwada about sending her? Because every block doesn't have a secondary school.
Right.
So what do we do about it? So then we go behind it, probe that, and then very gently, you use a socio-ecological model at each level. You will go to a school, you will work with girls and boys on gender through activities, no lecture, no film shows. We just do activities and they understand what happens in gender. What is gender and how it is a role assigned to male and female in every society. Then we would work with the parents on parenting and gender. Simple things, for example, we do a POW, we read out 15 sentences, ask men and women, parents, stand in a line, and each sentence, whichever applies to them, they take a step forward. At the end of 15 sentences, the men are far ahead and the women are left behind.
Correct.
So parents understand immediately, what gender and patriarchy and can do to them.
Correct.
Then we work with the panchayat and the district administration, build their capacity to deal with it, to do preventive work on child marriage. And then we work with the state level to make sure that the state rules for PCMA 2006, Prohibition of Child Marriage 2006 are in order. So you work across all the segments, and that's how behavior change eventually happens.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. My next question is that, when I was preparing for my conversation with you, I was fascinated to read that you have evidence-based SBCC solutions that you have developed and implemented. Tell me about this and give me one example.
Yeah. So, for example, we do an adolescent mental health program called Energetics in Bombay, in schools in Bombay. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but Maharashtra is the epicenter of teenage suicide in the country. We have 4 teenagers committing suicide every hour.
Wow.
And that's in the country. And it's because children, when they come into the 8th standard, suddenly parental pressure and peer pressure on school performance becomes acute.
Correct.
So acute in Bombay, for example, to get into a BA in HR college or Xavier or colleges of that size, you would have a minimum of 97% marks. That is a cutoff. So I mean, in my days, 97%, it was unheard of. Nobody even, but that's what it is. So parental pressure builds up. And WHO says about 24% of our adolescents are clinically depressed. The level of stress and anxiety amongst adolescents is very high. 60-70% in each class are stressed and highly anxious. What we did is we developed a program that uses mindfulness and uses emotion management, various therapies and exercises over a set of 8 to 10 hours with each. And then we test all the children through a psychology test to determine the level of stress, anxiety, and depression before the program. And then through the program, we measure them, and after the program. Now, this enables us to track scientifically, the how the child's changes, the mental health of the child changes, and the ability to cope with stress and anxiety changes. And then we published a white paper in the US, which is published at a major seminar in the US. It's a peer reviewed white paper, as we say in that establishment, which shows the measured responses impact of the program on children and their mental health. So this is an example. In the case of child marriage, you do a CAP study first, you understand what it means, then you develop the entire communication model, and then you go back and test it out through the research. And that is what we call evidence-based. Show that communication actually works through research, and then you go into the implementation mode.
Very interesting. And Nishit, what are some of the strategies that you have employed to address issues like adolescent mental health and child abuse?
See, for child abuse, it's a complex situation. So we run a 3-tier program. So for pre-primary children, we have created a song in English and Hindi. The song is about parts of the body from head to toe. And the objective of the song is to tell children which parts are covered by the underwear and are therefore private, and which parts are not and publicly exposed. So it tells children, gives also children the vocabulary. In Bombay, we did a research, and the vocabulary used by parents for children's penny and vagina was the main point and central point. That was the most popular in Bombay at the time when we did the research. So in the song, we tell boys and girls that boys have a penis and girls have a vagina. We give them the vocabulary to tell what happens if somebody touches those areas of private. That's a song. It's a fun song in only 2 notes so that they can remember it for life, like Jack and Jill and all that. Then in the primary section, we do a storytelling method. We have a trained volunteer, who goes and enacts a story about a child and what he's feeling about an aunt, and how his friend says, go to Sher Khan in the zoo and ask him. And Sher Khan represents an authority figure. Correct. And the Sher Khan tells him about, how to understand what touches, something causes some hurt in you and why that is wrong. Correct. So hidden in the story are safe touch, unsafe touch, and personal safety rules. We just enact the story. We don't give a lecture, nothing. In the secondary section, we are talking about agency, consent, and online safety. So, when the teenager goes, when we did research in among standard 9th and 10th students in Bombay, girls told us, please tell us how we should react when boys look at our thighs and breasts. Girls have those kind of issues, and these are real issues in society. So you have to address those issues, make them understand what is agency, what does it mean to take control of decisions that impact your body, or decisions that impact your life, and what is consent? What is the meaning of consent? How is it given? When is it consent? And when it is not consent and no. So all of those things come in.
Very interesting. Very interesting. But you were just telling me that this is a huge problem in our country. Do you sense that culture across our country has an impact on this very important subject? And a follow-up question is, can groups of children be taught to fight abuse together?
Oh, yes. The culture is certainly an issue. In the case of sexual abuse, typically we see that countries which are very conservative about male-female integration from childhood, in a society or in a community, those societies who are very conservative tend to have a much higher level of child sexual abuse. In 2004-05, the government of India did a study and found that 52% of all children in India, boys and girls, were sexually abused in one form or the other by the age of 10. That's 1 in 2 children. Yeah. It's a government study. Wow. So culture certainly has an impact. Integration and gender roles and patriarchy. These all, and patriarchy tends to be different in different countries. And in Taliban in Afghanistan says girl must not even talk in public, must not go to school, must not go to college. The moment they came, 30,000 university graduates were sent home.
Correct.
So in different countries, different cultures, gender and patriarchy has different meanings and different levels of depth. And that affect abuse, certainly affects abuse.
Very interesting.
So, but it's certainly possible for large groups of children to be sensitized to what abuse means. Children don't understand sexual abuse particularly.
Absolutely.
Nowadays, in big cities, children are beginning to understand the issue of physical, abuse. The right to education prohibits teachers from doing any kind of physical abuse of
Correct.
children, and children are now more open, and the millennial parents are more conscious about these kind of things. Abuse in other forms is growing. I can't say that. Look, so long as parents are not comfortable telling child what parts of your body are private, what are public,
Correct.
who can see and touch it, so long as that exists, there will be an issue. But it can be addressed when we collectively form an intervention that creates awareness, sensitizes, and then empowers the target audience.
Amazing. Nishit, I have time for one more question, and I want to come to your award-winning film that has been developed by SBC Cube, titled Komal. Tell me about this film, because this is an internationally acclaimed film on child sexual abuse.
Yeah, I made the film not in SPC3, but I made the film during my tenure in Childline.
Okay.
And basically, when I went on Satyamev Jayate, and the country saw what this issue was the first time, a lot of people online, they phoned online, online numbers are provided, and they committed donations. And then, Nita Ambani doubled the donations, so we raised 1.5 crores in the program. And with that fund, I created this Komal film in 14 languages. And in each language, 4 versions. One, a regular 2D animation version, another with a sign language, another with supers at the bottom, and another where a narrator tells a story. So whether you're visually challenged or hearing impaired or whatever, you can still see the film. And then when each frame of the film, I had to research, set up a panel of children, a panel of parents, and basically research each frame. You could talk about sexual abuse to a certain point. But if, for example, you showed sexual abuse happening in reality, no parent will show the film to the child. So each frame had to be researched. And Kirit Purana, an amazing animation filmmaker, a very talented filmmaker, he directed that entire film. And once the film was ready, it became viral almost overnight.
Wow.
Parents put it on WhatsApp, became viral. It has now 80 million views on YouTube.
My goodness.
And 30 countries around the world, including Mongolia, Philippines, Palestine, Vietnam, they wrote to us saying that, can we dub your film in our language and use it in our country? The UNCHR, which is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, they said in our refugee camps, we have 4-5 million people around the world, and we would like to use this film in the local language. So we gave them rights to dub it. Then the president gave an award for to the film for the best educational film. And the Ministry of Women and Child then made it mandatory viewing for all CBSE schools. So that's the story. Komal is really a film which very sensitively shows the process of how grooming happens, which is targeting a child and building a relationship with a child, and then how the abuse happens and what happens to a child, the feelings of guilt that happens to a child, and it shows all the process, and it also has the safe and unsafe touch teaching, where when it comes to teaching.
Wow. On that note, Nishit, and your amazing story of Komal, and I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Komal on YouTube. I'm going to do the same. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own amazing journey from Nelco to Trikaya to SPC Cube. Thank you also for talking to me about the vision and mission of SBCC, how you are different. We spoke about culture. We spoke about adolescent health and child abuse. We also spoke about evidence-based SBCC solutions that you have developed. You also talked to me about what can be done to protect our children. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the brand called You Videocast and Podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.